everybody. Hello, hello. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. This is a huge crowd. Okay, first I just want to remind everybody what is probably obvious to us all, is that this is a public hearing. This is an opportunity for you to tell, convey, and give feedback to New England Development about their plans, their proposed plans for Waterfront West. I want to remind you that there is no project that has been applied for. This is just a informational hearing. They have not applied for anything yet. And as most of you know, there's a process that will happen. They need approval from the council in order for this to pass. So in any case, tonight is the night for you to say what you think about the plans. Now, I would encourage you, I see my role as I see our committee's role. Excuse me, sorry. I don't really like being in front of the public like this. My name is Leah McGavran. I'm on the planning board, and I am the planning board chair of the planning board subcommittee on Waterfront West, and I am co-chair, this is very confusing, with Jared, who is a council member and, and also the chair of the committee on planning on development on the council. And so I feel like it is very much my responsibility, as well as the committee's responsibility and all of your responsibility, to try and get this plan to the best places possible so that when it goes before the council and for the community through a official process, that we have the best plan we can get, and that's when we decide whether or not it's a good fit for the community. Right now, and the process that should happen tonight, is we need to give them feedback to help them to make this a good plan and to make it a good fit for Newburyport. Now, we all have a different vision. We all have a different idea about what that is. So I ask you to put on your objective hat and really process what you think is something that is good for everybody. Change is really hard. Some of us don't want to see, I know some people out here don't want to see any change at all on the waterfront, and I respect that and I understand that. But it would be really helpful if comments tonight were productive. Give them useful feedback so they can improve their plans so that when it comes before us in an official capacity, we can judge it on its best merits. So having said that, the format for tonight is going to be New England Development is going to do a short presentation. We've asked them to minimize it and keep it to 20 minutes. They have already said that they're going to have a very hard time doing that because they have a lot they want to convey to us and tell us about. I will give them a 20-minute heads up and hope that they can then wrap it up in shortly thereafter. So let's all be patient. At least it's cooled down in here a little bit, so that should help. It's still hot, I know, but it could have been worse. So for your information, we as a committee have only met a few times, but we have met periodically to review the plans as proposed. And we have written up a list of criteria that we think are important for this site and this development moving forward. And then we indexed those criteria with certain bullet points that we gave to NED and hoped that they could reach those or match those indexes in their design. And then when they gave us a new set of plans a couple weeks ago, we met between 2 weeks ago and today, and we rated the plans on the indexes that we created. And those were online. I don't know if you've had a chance to see them or not, but they were online, and they were posted again after we made our updates. I'm going to just really quickly go through that criteria tonight so you know where we are coming from and the kinds of things that we're looking for. Hopefully there's some of the things that you're looking for in it too. We may not have hit all of your concerns. There are a lot of issues here, and a lot of these issues will be dealt with as the process continues, particularly when it goes through more of an official process. There will be more hearings and so on and so forth. Are you going to put that up? Were you going to put the criteria up on the screen? I wanted the criteria first. hang on a minute while Andy gets that up on the screen. Let me just say also that when we do come, we want to get the presentation done quickly and expeditiously so that we have plenty of time for public comment. Gosh, there are so many of you here. So if you could please keep your comments to 2 minutes. If you've already heard something said with a view that you share, please just say, I want to second the person who said that, and hopefully that will be enough, because otherwise we could be here till the wee hours. Also, I want to just encourage you not to try to engage New England Development. This isn't a conversation, this is just feedback. And this will all be recorded. We have a note taker. It's also all being videoed, so you can go back and see this. And this will all, NED is here to hear, they're not here to engage. And once we start engaging, the meeting can take twice as long, and it's just not nearly as efficient. I believe that's all. Is there anything? Let me just introduce who's here and who the subcommittee is. Jared, would you like to introduce your subcommittee?
Hello, I'm Jared Eigerman. I chair the Committee on Planning and Development. With me is Councilor Heather Shand, the third member from our committee of the City Council. So 3 of us out of the 11 councilors is Larry Junta, who can't be here tonight. I think Leah covered the ground. The only thing I would add is we do take written testimony, and I've gotten some written emails already. We save all of them, we share them with each other, we read them, we pass them along. So if you don't get a chance to speak tonight, not all is lost, please write in. And now Leah is going to take us through this grid. We had a chance last week with a public meeting, and there were members of the public there witnessing it, but we did not have a chance to go through this. So we basically filled out the last column. We had already done the earlier columns in May of what we thought our criteria was. So she'll, in a second, take you through what we concluded last week. That's our working document, but we have not had a chance to hear from the public. So to me, that's the #1 object tonight, is to hear from as many of you as possible. And with that, I'll sit down again.
And let me just quickly introduce, this is Andrew Shapiro and Ann Gardner, who are also on the subcommittee with me. And I encourage you to jump in if you want to highlight or correct something that I say, as well as the council members. I'm going to try and do this fast because, as you know, there's a lot of material. I'll speak more about the things that I think we and perhaps you care more deeply about. And I can't read that. I don't know if you can. But I'll do the best I can to summarize it. And it is online, so if you can't see it tonight, you can find it online. The first one is height, and I think that is probably one of the most important ones to a lot of people here. We said that the group being our subcommittee, agreed that the 3 and 4 stories is appropriate height limit throughout the site. This limit is driven by the viewscape as seen from across the river and by the idea of keeping the pedestrian experience similar to that of downtown. NED would have to present a compelling case for a 5-story structure. It is imaginable that a partial 5-story building could be proposed as an architectural feature, especially if complemented by a 1- or 2-story building on the site for the purposes of adding variety. And the indexes for that, and this is what we would measure their plans against, were to limit the limitation to 3 to 4 stories is generally maintained. If a 5-story building is proposed, it is works in its proposed location and contributes to design and massing variety. And the existing skyline still dominates the view from across the river, and the development is not prominent. Well, here's what we saw in the plans based on those indexes. That the limit to 3 to 4 stories is generally maintained, but the 5-story buildings are not compelling as proposed. They appear massive and do not add to design and massing variety. The massing of the flat-roofed buildings detracts from the skyline. A view from across the river is still needed to evaluate the effect on the skyline. A view from the rail trail is requested to evaluate the effect of massing on the pedestrian experience. So that's addressing height. Now, density follows because it's entwined. The issues are not separate necessarily. Our indexes for that were don't necessarily get at the height. Our indexes were vehicular traffic impact demonstrated to be less than significant or mitigated to that level. Now, we respond to that by saying it's still a concern, but evaluation pens a traffic study. So we're not even really going to the traffic issue tonight. Obviously, density and the height of the buildings affects traffic, but traffic specifically is not going to be discussed tonight. And we mentioned impact on the schools, but again, that's for the next hearing, no doubt. Public open space. I'm going to just quickly summarize this and just say that generally we found the public spaces in these most recent plans to be successful. And I would encourage you all that if you have a lot of negative things to say about the plans, there must be, I hope there's something positive you can say also, because that's, you know, that's the kind of feedback they need to know too. What is working, what is not working. And we thought the public spaces, particularly the public courtyard and the way they addressed the needed elevation change due to floodplain and the steps in the courtyard areas were successful. Design style is another biggie, and I would say it's a biggie for me in particular, and I would also suggest that it's directly connected to the density and the height issues. I think a lot of these problems could be solved in a coordinated way if any one of these issues were addressed. I'm going to go right to the indexing and skip the design style summary, the objective part on the left, just for saving time. The indexes are high quality materials are proposed, and there is attention to details and amenities considered. There is a variability in the building massing and style. Roof forms are broken and diverse. Entries are welcoming, and the interface of public and private space is well defined and compelling. The existing skyline still dominates the viewscape from across the river. And this is what we saw in the plans. The variability in the massing and style is a serious concern. Although much of the building detail may be forthcoming, these characteristics are critical to the success and approval of the project and should be integral to the conceptual design, meaning we should see that now, not wait for those details to be forthcoming, because it has everything to do with whether or not it's going to fit in Newburyport. Roof forms, especially in the 5-story buildings, but also in the 4-story buildings, are not broken and diverse. And the predominance of flat roofs, both 4- and 5-story, detract from the views from the bridge and across the river. Entry and architectural details will be evaluated when more details are forthcoming, because that will be coming, assuming this process moves forward. Pedestrian experience, it really iterates. It's very similar to some of the other comments. We applauded the vibrancy of the public spaces and the integration of commercial space. We assume that more architectural details on these pedestrian and public areas will be forthcoming. Parking really needs to be evaluated when we have a parking study, which we have asked for. We have not seen yet, but we would like to see a full study of the parking with on a plan where all the spaces are going to be, and that will be forthcoming, I presume. I hope this is useful. Okay. And I am skimming some, but the streets, we didn't want any, well, I mean, the streets will be private, but we wanted them all to be publicly accessible. Streets will have hierarchies and help define the fronts and backs of buildings through the use of trees, sidewalks, and appropriate dimensions. And these are the indexes that I'm reading. Do I see it on, is that on the screen? I'm on streets right now. There is a demonstrated plan for vehicular flow through the site. I personally still need some clarification on that. Streets are hierarchical with the appropriate related widths. Sidewalks are in appropriate locations. Street materials contribute to the clarity of use. And what we saw in the plans, and our response to those indexes are that streets are accessible to the public, are appropriately hierarchical, and work well with the building forms. The group agreed was an improvement over the plans from last year, where we felt it was very confusing. A lot of the buildings, you couldn't tell what was the front or the back of the building. there were a lot of, there were many fingers in many ways down to the water, but it was very unclear which ones were for public to use, which ones were going to be the pleasant ones, and which ones were going to be the ones for the cars to use, which ones, they were just all very similar, and the plan generally seemed to lack readability, lacked order and hierarchy. So we feel like the sidewalks, it seems appropriate, but we are hoping for more information before we fully evaluate the sidewalks and vehicular flow. The hotel. So what we said about the hotel is we asked that the hotel is proposed for along the water's edge. We refer to a building number that I think the numbers have changed, but that was in the last plan. Another index is that NED has committed to the hotel, and if there is no commitment to the hotel or its location on the water, we need clear evidence demonstrating the lack of viability for this. Now, NED is currently proposing that it be on the water, but this is what we saw in the plans. The proposed hotel location on the water is appropriate and agreeable. NED's mention of building the hotel as part of the whole project build-out is agreeable, because in this plan, differentiated from the last version, was that most of this development was going to be built at one time, or in 1 to 2 phases, as opposed to being drawn out over what would probably have been many years. So the last index on the hotel is that commitment from NED is still required on both the above points. Mixed use and commercial. It's still useful for me to read these out loud? I'm getting a no and I'm getting a thank you. All right, I'll try and be quick, honestly. Our indexes are that there are an appropriate number of commercial retail office spaces along the water between Michael's and the Black Cow to ensure a vibrant public experience. The ends of the buildings at the water's edge are configured to accommodate commercial use and are visually differentiated. And the shops are of small scale, and building number 2, the one up on Merrimack Street, which you'll see in the plans, is of mixed use and some retail component on the ground floor. Generally, we agreed that we liked the mix of the 10,000 square foot that were proposed. It was congregated along the courtyard, which you'll see. We felt that that was good and felt appropriate. Obviously, there are a lot of mixed feelings or disagreements on how much retail or commercial, and actually whether it's retail or commercial on the water. But we felt like it was an appropriate amount. And then we need more information to properly evaluate what they look like and what the feel is and whether or not they're architecturally feel right. Marina uses, just so you know, a group of the subcommittee and some counselors met with NED and Paul Hogg, our harbor master, and he felt like there would be no appreciable change to the waterfront uses. Now, I know that's a controversial one, and so if you have comments on that, please feel free to say them tonight, as I'm sure you will. But just so you know, Paul Hogg did look at it and felt like there was no appreciable differences, or would be no appreciable differences to how the waterfront is used and functions right now. Just putting that out there. And then lastly, we weren't going to discuss the zoning ordinance change until all of these design issues were met. And with that, I hope that was quick enough and clear. We'll let New England Development present, and I believe Ricardo Dumont is going to, the architect is going to present.
Leah, thank you. My name is John Tuig. Here with me tonight from New England Development, Mike Duffy, who's in the front row, Tim Sullivan from Goulston Stores, and Ricardo Dumont, who's our planner and architect. Leah said we have 20 minutes, maybe plus a couple of minutes we can cheat, so we're going to go a little quickly tonight. Talk a little bit about where we've been. Although there have only been a few meetings recently, as you know, and many of you were here, we have gone through a process over the last year with a plan and how to move this forward. We did submit a draft zoning text. We went through a plan. We did have a traffic report that was peer-reviewed, stormwater report, utility report. We focused on a lot of design issues. We had tech reviews with DPW. So we have spent a lot of time to try to figure out what is the best plan going forward. And as Leah said tonight, part of the goal tonight is to hear people's commentary. But we're also going to try to answer some of the questions that were asked. And Ricardo, as quickly as we can, are going to focus on some of those questions so that we can perhaps answer some of the concerns that were raised and some of the issues. It might help you frame your questions and your commentary. Some of the things that we did. People didn't like parts of the plan. Thought we had too many buildings, so we reduced the building count. Didn't like the visual connection. Wanted it to be more open as you walked along the water. Minimize the phasing. People were very concerned about, well, if you're going to have 7, 8 buildings and you're going to build them all over time, that means people are living through that and that's the experience. How can you make that less phases, but that also means we have to do a lot more of the infrastructure and build out, which is the positive part, a lot of the public infrastructure as part of that. So that's something you're going to see from Ricardo. Reduced and varied the building heights. One thing you're going to see, every one of our buildings, or actually 6 of 8 of them, had 5-story elements. Now 2 of the buildings have 5-story elements. They're 3, they're 4, they're 5-story. But before you make your decision on the height, I want you to listen to Ricardo to understand that this site drops 14 feet from Merrimack Street. And what does that really mean as we go through that? So Ricardo's going to spend a few minutes on that. Active streetscapes, we'll spend a couple of minutes on that. We've done that. A Merrimack Street courtyard. The marina operations, as Leah mentioned, we spent some time with your harbor master and others to be sure that we had a program that protected and preserved the marina heritage and the 138 slips that were there. Parking, we're going to do parking as part of an overall traffic and parking study. A little bit of a touch on it tonight. One of the goals, we have more parking than we had on the last plan because people said, we want you to self-park and we want to know that it's not causing a burden on the community. So we're going to touch on that. Mike's going to speak to that in a few minutes. We reduced the overall program by about 20,000 square feet. Our master plan had about 200 residential units. We're between 200 and 230 at full build-out. We had 100 hotel rooms. We still do a little less commercial space than we had before. What are we going to try to cover in the next 15 minutes? We're not going to focus on rezoning because, as Leah said, the commentary was that's going to be a purpose of another meeting. What could be developed on the site? That was one of the questions. We did get a bunch of emails in. We got some emails from Andy. We got questions the last time. One of the things we're going to talk about very quickly is what can be developed on the site now. What are we proposing, and how does it meet the planning goals? A lot of people mentioned back in 2003 there was a master plan. This site has been planned for a couple of decades. It's never been developed. We want to talk a little bit about how our plan fits in with what the planning goals have been. Talk about the uses, talk about the marina, talk about parking for a minute. We're going to talk about height, and we're going to talk about density. We're going to show you a comparison on some of the other great spaces in Newburyport and how would this site compare to those. Design detail. Some of the commentary that's coming back on design. We're not designing the buildings. We're going to show you some more detail tonight, and Ricardo's going to show you sort of the images and the representative images that we want for this space to look like Newburyport, to be part of Newburyport. Pedestrian experiences, we'll touch on that a little bit. And then some of the city benefits. That was one of the other email we got. Well, what are the benefits to the community? What does that look like? So we'll touch on that for a minute. As I said, zoning we're not going to touch on. We had showed this before, what the zoning approach is and the master plan and how we take it through a process of meetings like this, but after we make our formal filing through the city council, through the planning board, and ultimately, hopefully, an approval through the council and the planning board. That's sort of the process that we're going to go through. So with that as an introduction, I'm going to turn, if you think about those 8 or 10 questions, those were, and if you look at the chart that Leah just went through, these are the issues: height, density, parking, pedestrian space, civic space. And we're going to try to touch on those again over the next 15 minutes or so. So I'm going to turn it over to Ricardo.
Thank you, John. So let's go through the questions. My name is Ricardo Dumont. Good to see you all here tonight. So what could be developed on the site without current rezoning? So we're going to look at three possible alternatives without any rezoning that would be a matter of right, as they would say, and allowable on the site. So one would be the idea of a waterfront mixed-use alternative at roughly 35 to 40 feet. You could see the building massing shown here. Again, retail at the ground floor, heights at 35 to 40 feet, 55 feet is allowable to the ridge. Maximum ground coverage, the amount of building area covering the site is about 30%, and it requires zoning board approval for site plan approval. So that's allowable zoning. Next use, an affordable residential 40B height at 55 feet is allowed on the site. So that's affordable residential, 300 plus units, height at 55 feet. Setbacks are very minimum on affordable housing at 10, 10, and 10. The same maximum ground coverage at 30%, and the zoning board of approval is a comprehensive permit for that. Now, if we wanted to go totally down the road of a working waterfront, the idea would be someone could build an indoor boat storage and repair business. Obviously, it's a waterfront. That's very similar to the uses that were here historically. So waterfront dependent boat storage, height of 43 feet. Setbacks are a little increased for this use because it's more industrial. Ground coverage is allowed at 50%, and it requires site plan approval by the planning board. So three uses to answer the question, what could be built instead of what we're putting forth for you tonight. So what are we proposing instead? So we're proposing a plan where the three historic ways to the water are preserved. So coming from Merrimack Street, the one coming down the side here, down here, McKay's Wharf down here, and the Brown Wharf right here coming down through there. So those three ways are preserved and improved as really the publicly accessible to the waterfront. And as John said, we made a number of modifications from last year to this year to congeal the plan to meet some of the specifications that came out of last year. Obviously, the number of buildings has been reduced to 8 to 5. That increases some of the efficiency on the site. Obviously, able to add a little bit more open space and street identity there. Focused on 3- and 4-story elements, with some with pitched roofs, some with flat roofs, and 2 5-story elements where we previously had 6 We had 6 buildings with 5-story elements. So, as John went through these, each one by, Michael will talk about the parking, which has been a major question and concern. We'll go into very detailed analysis of where that parking is. We've increased, as we said, from last time to 395 spaces. So is the plan consistent with the city's planning goals? John mentioned this. 2003 was the benchmark for what you wanted and said you wanted. As you can see here, the plan is a series of 3 streets to the waterfront were preserved. Same sort of massing of buildings here. There was a major parking area here. 3 simple blocks of buildings, very similar to where we've come to today. And there was a sort of a great sort of idea about open space at the waterfront, a publicly accessible waterfront, and obviously a working marina. So we looked for continuous waterfront access, ensure an active ground floor with the sort of commercial or cafe, restaurant uses, healthy mix of uses throughout the site, framework of streets, the 3 streets that I've mentioned in the public open space, and a new 4th public open space in a size and stature commensurate with the sort of quality we all and you are all looking for. And of course, maintain the working waterfront. So in the new plan today, we think we've met almost every one of those goals. Continuous and waterfront, we'll talk about how much space we're donating to the waterfront. Continuous and general access to the waterfront for passive enjoyment. Ensure the active ground floor of all the surrounding buildings around that space, so those are all publicly accessible uses at the ground floor. Obviously, the uses, including the hotel and residential, are major components for vitality for the district. The framework of streets is the 3 ways are preserved. As I've said before, great public space at the waterfront. We'll talk about the dimensions of that space later. And of course, maintaining the marina is the base of all the character. So, next question. What are the uses and where are you maintaining, and are you maintaining marine uses? So let's go through what's there today. So the goal is to maintain the working waterfront idea and add new vitality with new uses. Working waterfront, 138 slips, remain. The idea of the two great iconic restaurants remain. So those are elements today. The new ground floor elements of the 10,000 square feet that John mentioned becomes the new ground floor of the building surrounding the public square and facing these areas. So that's 10,000 feet of restaurant, cafe, commercial uses, or waterfront marina associated uses, 10,000 gross square feet. Potential hotel site. So we've broken the hotel massing into three masses, a main mass, a middle mass as a bridge, portal, and then a lower 4- and 3-story massing going to the waterfront. Remember, that's on top of the commercial uses that you'd normally associate with a great hotel. So that's 3, 4, and 4-story uses with a bridge connecting. And then we have residential, as John said, 200 to 230 residential units, depending on the type of units we're looking at. So we have 200 units there, shown in 4-story elements and 2 5-story elements. We'll talk about height in a minute. So those are the uses. Now, the question has been almost in every meeting we've had in the past year, the marina uses will remain. We've gone into talking with the harbor master. We've said, how would the uses and circulation work when people are accessing their boats, delivering materials? That public square will be serviced part-time and managed to allow those uses to occur, but most of the time we'd be more of a pedestrian space. But this shows you all the turning movements that could happen in that space to accommodate a working marina. And again, we realize there's a little tension between a working waterfront and a highly valuable urban civic space. But that's what we think is viable and the right use for a working waterfront to be true to its values. So we talked about some of the issues were about let's do a summary of that. Total square footage in September of this year is just under 300,000 square feet. That's an 8% reduction from last year's square footage that we showed. Building footprint is 82,000 square feet. That's a 5% reduction. These have been asked for, so we're just going to put the facts on the table. Total bedroom count last year was 300 rooms. We're about the same right now, depending on the home types. Parking spaces have seen a 37% increase over last year, so up to 395 spaces, as John said, so we can self-park each of the uses, not going into in city streets and parking lots. Civic open space, we're about 85,000. That's greater than the footprint of buildings. That's a 5% increase. We'll see more detail on that. The marina slips are unchanged at 138. And the 5-story elements, we're showing 2 buildings with 5 stories today. Previously, we had 6 of the buildings with 5-story elements. So those are just some facts asked for last time. Michael, we'll talk about the very easy issue of parking.
Hi, everyone. Mike Duffy. As Ricardo eloquently mentions, parking is a very easy issue. We'll walk through it. So as this plan has evolved, it's allowed us to focus specifically on the parking and how to maximize parking in these back areas. The previous plan had 6 to 8 pier-like buildings, which allowed for limited parking potential. Here, with the updated layout, we've been able to backload a lot of the parking for residential, and with that, it has freed up a lot of the on-site parking to service the marina. So with 138 marina slips, historically our operation on-site has allowed that we have never needed more than half a space per slip. A lot of people find that hard to believe, but we've been tracking it over the lifetime of operating that marina, and that is the data that is consistent with what we see. Residential parking, in a second I'll show you an update, a market study that we had done, which shows where the ratio that we feel is comfortable for a site like this, where that comes from. So as we park on site, all of the residential is located within these larger building masses on the first floor. So you'd have what is called the podium condition, where it's above the first floor you'll have residential units, and below it's really going to be parking at grade, but it's covered parking at grade. So this plan has allowed us to really load the parking for residential, which is entirely self-parked on the site, which is one of the biggest requirements. It's allowed us to keep that in a more secluded area. The last one is the hotel. So again, this would be a managed approach. At New England Development, we operate a number of hotels in our approach, and what we see historically in the data that we use is that half a space is adequate for this. It's a seasonal, a peak season hotel, so during the summer you'll see obviously a little more use, but it's not just confined here. So we would manage this parking at all times. It would be a valeted tandem approach, and our team would be on site to manage that. So as I had mentioned, market study on residential specifically. So we had, in between this process, we had done another market study to see the level of parking that we needed. Through work completed by the collaborative companies, they looked at a series of properties that are similar in type and size, and in a lot of the local municipalities that are very nearby: Georgetown, Rowley, Amesbury, Salisbury, and then in New Hampshire, both Hampton and Portsmouth. The review was of current market conditions and existing demands at these residential properties of similar size and scale. The market study proposed that we park it at 1.17 spaces per unit, and that's a weighted average across bedroom types. What we've proposed here is 1.25 per unit, and we've actually parked just above that. As noted, we will prepare a full parking study, which will be included in the transportation study by Vanass and Associates. We're in the works with that, and a lot of it takes into effect what we've just presented. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll have that finalized, but we feel pretty comfortable, given what the ratios are, that we can maintain this site for a long period of time. Marina, again, it just references the historical information that we have at Newburyport Marinas, and then the hotel parking component, again, is a managed approach on site with valet and tandem parking. Thank you.
Next question. Why is the proposed building height appropriate for the site? Obviously, those are some of the factors that Leah mentioned. Oh, sorry. Question, let me go back to question. What is the building height appropriate to the site? So, as we've said all along, new regulatory waterfront regulations insist that living occupied uses have to be at least 5 foot above the current grade on the site to allow waterfront conditions to flood if there was a major storm event. So here you see all the regulatory conditions we're trying to adhere to or are adhering to throughout the site. But basically, remember, we start at 5 feet above the current grade. So right now we have the two iconic restaurants are at 1 or 3 floor restaurants. Right there you see on either side of us as a benchmark of the site. We own those. As we said before, the front noses of the buildings going towards the waterfront, the sort of pier-like buildings, are at 3 floors. A greater majority of our building elements are at 4 floors, the hotel being, part of the hotel being a 4-floor element. Again, residential here. These are all residential uses. And then we have, as I said before, 2 5-floor elements, with the first floor being, of course, commercial on the waterfront side and on the street side at Merrimack. So we did a check. We wanted to see, one of our neighbors is Hortons. We all know Hortons. So here's Hortons in the section. Merrimack Street is here. You can see the elevation change of our site. So it's elevation 24 at Merrimack Street. Down at the site we're at 11. It gets down lower at elevation 7 or 8 down by the waterfront. So here's the current Hortons massing. Here's the 5-story, our tallest element near the waterfront. Down here, again, the bottom floor is either commercial or parking. And you can see the relative. So Norton's comes out at 69 feet, and the top of our 5th floor loft would be at 46 feet. So relative to what that particular situation is, we're in keeping because we can use the grade to our advantage going down the waterfront. Now we did a comparison. We stood back even further. I'm sorry for those of you who can't see. So we looked at all the area, all the buildings that are sort of major civic presence in our district. So here we have the Garrison Inn, Central Congregation Church. You can see the relative heights. Those you can see. Newburyport City Hall, where we are right now. Police Station, 45 Merrimack Street. Then we have the old factory building, the long pier building at 44 Merrimack. You can see the height of that at 44 feet with some element going, the tower element for elevator going up. And behind that, you can see Horton's Landing up at 59 feet. And then this is the hotel idea, 3 basic massing, a 4-story element, a bridge element, and then the 4- and 3-story elements down to the waterfront. So that's the sort of relativity of what building heights mean in our community and how they apply to our waterfront.
Is this on? Yeah. I'd like to stop you there and maybe make a request of the co-chairs. You've gone over 20 minutes. Much of the presentation is what you presented 4 weeks ago, and the other factors a year ago. I'm very aware we've got a large room full of very hot people who came out tonight to comment on the design that you haven't changed since a month ago. So, Leah, you told me to jump in. I would really like to suggest we get to public hearing, and if there's any time at the left, I've gone through your whole package, there's no changes.
Your prerogative. Your prerogative. Go ahead.
Why don't you just take a couple of minutes to wrap up any last slides? Is there anything? Because we really got it. Anything you want to hit?
Density issues. I mean, that's one that's probably.
Yeah. Use your mic. Yeah.
Yes.
Just hit a couple more slides, and then we're
Okay.
gonna go.
Let's talk about the issue of density. That was second on Leah's list. Program density. So we went back and said, okay, what is the city today in the current sort of civic districts at the heart of the city? So we look at the Market Square District. Again, what is density? This floor area ratio. It's the total amount of square feet over the total amount of land it's sitting on, including any public civic space. So Market Square District, we're at 1.1. So remember those numbers, 1.1 FAR. In the downtown State and Pleasant Street District, we're at 1.2. That's 9.7 acres. Certain building square footage, 525,000 over 425. Brown Square District, we're at 0.9. And what we're proposing in our 5.1 acre site is 1.3. So that's 5.1 acres, just under 300,000 square feet, over 220,000 square feet. So we feel we're in the ballpark of what the character that promotes Newburyport, we're in the ballpark.
Okay, thank you. All right, so a ton of people here. We want to get you all in. So we'll be 2 minutes each. Please line up, state your name and your address. If you're an attorney, you have to tell us if you're representing somebody. That's the rule. And we'll get through everybody. Thank you.
I have a lot to say. I do. These girls serve me coffee right on the river.
Members of the committee, Lisa Mead, Tellerman Costa, on behalf of Horton's Yard, and I've had 2 good friends of mine give me their 2 minutes, just in case. So I want to make a couple of initial comments. I represent Horton's Yard, but I, quite frankly, am offended and tired of hearing misstatements and representations. You may not, under the Waterfront West Overlay District, do anything by right. It is a special permit. You may not create multifamily housing under the WMU underlying district without a special permit. If you create a 40B, there is a limitation on the number of units in a large project. You are subject to 25% affordable housing, and you are limited to 20% profit over development costs, and the state will get to audit your books. Those are 3 very important things. So those pictures up there are wrong. The Zoning Board of Appeals would have a right to review a comprehensive permit, and you would not automatically get to create a block building as presented. The scare tactics have to stop. I would also like to initially say that I would really like the city to take back control of this process. I think the city should very clearly state parameters because they're not being listened to. What is the absolute acceptable density? Not 230 units, I hope, but maybe 100 or 150, I don't know. What is the required minimum open space? What is your cap on height? Not stories, but height, because there's a big difference. Next, I would like you to look at the Waterfront West zoning purposes, scale, setbacks, height, density, all found in the downtown historic business district. Ample public space, intimately scaled streets and public pedestrian ways with key views to the water from Merrimack Street. Maintain and protect marine-dependent uses. Then I'd like you to look at the very most recent 2017 master plan, which says, land use goal 2, downtown waterfront area that is welcoming to the community, respectful of the city's maritime heritage, and complementary to the downtown's commercial core. Creating a welcoming environment at the waterfront must go hand in hand with the preservation of the city's maritime history. Accommodate households with varying housing needs and family structure. Diversity of housing. At least 10% of the city's year-round housing stock should be affordable and helped by any new scale. Appropriate terms of location, size, scale, form, architecture, materials, massing. These are all in the current master plan. With that, I have 3 points, major points. Height and location, massing of the buildings, particularly the 5-story structures, which are really not 5 stories, are too tall, too dense, do not exhibit sufficient architectural articulation and interest, nor do they respect the historic land development patterns. City Hall, the Garrison Inn, Horton's Yard, 44 Merrimack Street are not located on the waterfront. So I would recommend that the buildings not be higher than 35 or 40 feet. They increase their architectural design and respect what we've already said. The waterfront dependent uses are reduced, and due to the building configuration, traffic patterns are discouraged. If you actually look at that plan that shows how the boats are being taken out of the water, they have to go through the bridge that connects the hotel to the restaurant. That's just not physically possible.
Okay, two more points.
And finally, the traffic patterns are not well articulated yet. We really need to see that traffic analysis. I really would like the city to hire its own traffic engineer, do its own study based upon whatever proposal you ultimately have in order to do a fair rendering of what's adequate for parking and traffic. And finally, you really, really have to look at this mix of housing and not create some kind of enclave down here that is different from the entire rest of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, dear.
Okay, thank you. All right, I gave some leeway. Let's try to keep the applause down. It'll just take time. Let's get everybody in. Please, sir, go right
By
ahead.
all
Name and
means.
address.
Hello, my name is Robert James McLernan, and these girls right here, they serve me coffee right down on that river. If you guys take it all away and all this big money will make it all happen, it will never be the same. I'm from Peabody, Massachusetts. And I've come here to Salisbury. I live right down the street. I come down that Eastern Marsh Trail, and I come down here every weekend, and I love this. I'm a lobster fisherman now. This is my first season, and now I've enjoyed this whole area. If you guys build all this big money stuff, you're never going to have Newburyport again. You're never going to have the Garrison Boutique Inn. These guys, I'm sorry, sir, but you can try and build all of this, but it will never be Newburyport. It will never be. Like I said, I'm from Peabody, and you'll never make what you're trying to get right here into what you want, because it will never be Newburyport. And they said I had 2 minutes, but this is it. You know what I mean? Newburyport's a special place to me, and I enjoy it. And Sarah is next.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Peterson. I live on 23 Borbo Terrace, right by Turkey Hill. However, I've worked at Plum Island Coffee Roasters for the past year and a half, and I've loved living in Newburyport, born and raised my whole life. However, I've just liked it. Since I've worked at Plum Island Coffee Roasters, it's brought me a community that I've come to know and love. It is the appeal of Newburyport that I love. I've gotten to know and meet so many different people. I've branched out. As a millennial, as the future of the North Shore and Newburyport that I plan to stay in, I would love to see Newburyport stay the way it is, because this is the appeal. Not hotels, not condos. This is not what I was born and raised into loving. What I love is the boatyard and the community that I love as Newburyport. Personally, I didn't like the phrase iconic restaurants, because Plum Island Coffee Roasters is also iconic, and I would like to see that iconic as well. And that's like Rob, I know it's got to be brief, but I don't see Newburyport without the boatyard. I do not see it without Plum Island Coffee Roasters, and I do not see it without the community that I have been loving for 22 years and want to continue to love for a long time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mariah Collins. I am originally not from Newburyport. I live on Ashland Street now. I moved here within the past year, and Sarah has said a lot of exactly how I'm feeling. I have built a sense of community here in Newburyport through Plum Island Coffee Roasters, through just the authenticity of the boatyard, seeing the mix of people from all walks of life being able to come down here, enjoy the space, and there's nothing that is going to be able to replace it. I don't think that anything that can be built can replace what is there, just the charm, the community, and everyone just from everywhere. We have people that have contacted us from California, from Seattle, Los Angeles, Florida, wherever, to say that Plum Island Coffee Roasters is a very special place to them. They've met some of their life partners there, their friends, lifelong friends. It's kind of like a church to many people. We're there 364 days a year, and there's people there 364 days a year with us. We're a family, and to just destroy that entire area would be, I think, detrimental to the future of Newburyport, which I feel like I represent because I didn't start here, but I want to build my future and my life here. And I don't want to see that go away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Art Courier. I live at 100 State Street, downtown Newburyport. I've lived in Newburyport for 41 years. I'm here to just acknowledge the fact you've made an attempt tonight to answer some of the questions that have been posed. There's hundreds more that haven't been answered. The challenge that you're facing is you're dealing with numbers, statistics, primarily. And what I said the last time we talked, it's about the feel. There's a character to Newburyport. You haven't come close to presenting how this is going to feel and not impact negatively what Newburyport's all about. That's the task at hand. It's not how many parking spaces, that's part of it, but it's not what it's about. The people are here because they're concerned about how it's going to impact, what the flavor of Newburyport is. And I hope you can stand tall to that challenge and answer every question that's been asked during the few months and not sidestep any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Vogel. I'm a resident of Newburyport. I've lived here for since 1992. I'm a little bit of an interesting position as I'm a tenant of New England Development, and I'm also a city councilor. And to that end, I've spoken with the Ethics Commission, and I've been given guidance that I cannot speak as a city councilor, and I am recused from the conversation and from the debate. I can only look at it and sit in the back of the room. And I cannot address the issues around the business of Newburyport, of Plum Island Coffee Roasters. So I'm here speaking as a citizen. And as such, and as very much as I'd like to speak as a tenant, I would like to urge that panel there and every city councilor in town to speak to some of the tenants in the community and get a feel for New England development as opposed to just how they seem to be to you. So from a citizen's perspective, I find this development to be, I don't even think the word too dense covers it. Perhaps it's sterile, it's massive, and it's uninviting. The one word that jumped out at me was the word portal. I was a tour guide on Alcatraz in the late 70s. Seriously.
A little closer to the mic, Bruce.
Anyway, as a tour guide in Alcatraz in the late 70s, and one of the main features of the island, when you got off the boat and you went up into the island, you went through a portal. And that portal was there to defend. And I find that portal to be the most uninviting element of your proposal and that I've ever seen. Why not put a drawbridge and a moat around the thing? What good does all of that do Newburyport? I can tell you, exactly. I just don't get it. You're going to build a sterile, you're going to build a self-contained, walled city. And with regard to your working waterfront, there's no travel lift. I would encourage every single one of you in this room and on that panel to go down to the boatyard when they start taking boats out of the water. You want to make money, you ought to charge for watching that. It's fascinating.
Bruce.
And that's a working boatyard. That's Newburyport. That's our heritage. I've only been here since 1992, so it's somebody's heritage. But in any event, that's what's happening. And what you're doing is you're destroying that. You're taking it all away.
Bruce, please wrap up.
Got it. No boat storage, no boatyard, no boat repair, no boat sales. It's not a working waterfront. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hazem Mahmood, 52 Ferry Road. I'm sorry that my comments is going to sound the same like last meeting, but I felt I was giving the runaround last time. I had specific questions and I explained it. To judge density, what is the footprint square feet before and now? And I was told 20,000. Today I find it's 20,000 in the total space of the building. That doesn't explain the density. What was the percent of building of the land and what it is now, so we can judge it. The same thing was the parking. I'm not going to say we're being compared apples and oranges. No, we really compared golden apples with Macintosh apples. That's how deceiving has been, because we're told they increased to 392, but they added all the open space parkings. But we never saw a number of the residential parking underground that it was there before, and now that will enable to judge. They said they increased the public space, but in fact, when you look, most of the public space is going to be shared with parking. Even the gateways to the water, there's going to be cars parking there, so we're going to have a 5-foot sidewalk to get there, while trucks and boats and everything. I don't think this is inviting pedestrian experience when we know that even in High Street, you take your life in your hand when you're crossing the street, not with parking. The other thing that I was very clear about is FEMA. Can you put, please, the last where is the black cow is, the old one? So people will see that is in a VE, which is 14-foot elevation. And the rest of your development is AE, which is 13-foot elevation. According to FEMA guidelines, and I would like the City Council to get approval from FEMA before any construction or zoning, because FEMA in 2014 changed the plans. In 2013, it says very clearly the guidelines for construction, nothing below
please
the
wrap up.
horizontal except storage, parking, access. Last time you told me there's no living quadrants, but there are living people in restaurants and retail spaces. You cannot put them below that elevation according to FEMA. It has to be either parking.
Dr. Mahmood, please
space.
wrap up. You're over time. Thank you.
Good evening. Rick Tainter from 10 Dexter Street. There's been a lot of discussion about density and height, and these are important issues, but I don't think they're really the fundamental issues. The focus on density height should be secondary to whether the project works, whether the site plan works, and the amount of building coverage, building height, building count, unit count are irrelevant if the site plan doesn't make sense in terms of public benefit. If the city is going to change its zoning to allow a different type of development than currently is allowed, the benefit of rezoning to the developer has to be balanced with the increased benefit to the city, and I believe that this is not the case with the current proposed site plan. I think we have to look to the 2003 Waterfront Strategic Plan, which is really an important foundational document. It's the most specific plan we have for the waterfront, and a lot of thought went into it. That plan had at least 3 fundamental features that are absent from the current plan. The strategic plan calls for a new public street to be created along the waterfront, connecting the Michaels driveway to the public parking area at Waterfront Park. It shows all the new buildings set behind this new street, that is on the south side of the street, so that the area between the street and the river is left open for marina and boatyard uses and public access and enjoyment. And it calls for a separated bicycle and pedestrian path connecting the harbor walk to the central waterfront, providing street level access to active storefronts. In contrast, the current plan has the new street paralleling the river dead ends at the hotel. There's not a through movement there. 2 buildings are placed along the waterfront, privatizing this valuable public space. Storefronts are elevated up to 6 feet above the street level, and one of the 2 buildings parallel to the water has no commercial space at all. And public access to the waterfront is limited to a winding boardwalk around these private buildings. And as a result, the public benefits of the strategic plan are significantly sacrificed to private gains. I would also note, as a couple of people have mentioned, that there's a lot of mispresentation in the presentation. If you look at the slide that's before us right now, you see a green space at Waterfront West. And in fact, as a previous speaker mentioned, about a third at least of that horizontal distance from the waterfront is taken up by parking spaces and circulation areas, and the rest of it is...
Please wrap up.
Okay, sorry. I have a lot of detail that I will send to you in detail.
Thank you.
But I do want to make my presentation really more to you than to the developer. I think you really need to go back and look at the function of the plan as the city had planned it rather than the developer's proposal.
Thank you.
David Chatfield, 67 Federal Street. And I have never been a tour guide for the Alcatraz jail, just to clarify. The Resiliency Committee has been looking at various studies that have been done at the city. There's 4 studies that have looked at the flooding issues that are on the City of Newburyport site. I'm hoping that NED has looked at those studies because they are going to be turned into requirements at some point of time. So I would like to really know, what assumptions have you started with in that area? What are the design parameters? For instance, are you looking at this project as a 10-year project, a 100-year project? Most of our houses in Newburyport, they looked out a long way. If you do that, what did you assume the sea level rise would be over the project life? What did you assume the storm surge would be? What did you assume the river flooding will be? Have you, in your plans, protected utilities from flooding and severe weather? Have you protected the storage areas of chemicals, recycling, trash? Have you looked at hurricane protection? We've been very lucky over the years. Luck. Have you thought about whether you're going to meet hurricane standards or not meet hurricane standards? Are you going to make places for people to be protected in? Are you going to be providing backup power? So my overall thing for you is, how are you considering climate change as you move forward with this project? And are you going to meet those requirements? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Mike Strauss, 56 Federal Street, and chair of the Newburyport Energy Advisory Committee. Newburyport has made a strong commitment to be a net zero city. Net zero is in the energy roadmap funded by the state through our green community status. Net zero is in our new master plan, which has been ratified by the city council. Our mayor has signed the C40 declaration obligating all new building development in the city to be net zero by 2030 and all buildings in the city to be net zero by 2050. Hall in Moscow, a local private developer, is in the middle of construction of a net zero housing development, Hillside Center, which includes affordable housing. So we know that net zero development can be done privately and profitably in Newburyport today. In addition, we believe that designing for net zero now will be much more cost effective than retrofitting buildings later. We know NED is in our community for the long run. This development will have to be net zero in the near future. It is the sensible approach to plan for it and do it now. We recommend NED provide a verified carbon footprint analysis for the development and modify the development so that it is net zero. This analysis is consistent with other submittal requirements that are currently required, such as a traffic and parking plan. The EAC, Energy Advisory Committee, would be happy to work with NED on this if they like. Thank you.
Thank you.
How you guys doing? My name's Noble. I was born in Newburyport. I live over across the bridge in Salisbury now. Noble Flanagan. Personally, I'm here because I have a vested interest in PCIR, which is the best coffee in town. Not a dig at wherever Bruce is at your other 2 spots. But you know, the girls asked me to look into it and see what was going on, and the more I looked into it, the more it seemed that this project, and I haven't been following it for very long, but from what I've noticed is that this project more so benefits NED, you know, the people who are paying for it and the people who are going to profit off of it, not necessarily the town of Newburyport. In several senses. One, this is a historic town. The North Shore is the oldest land in the country. I mean, Newburyport's so old that it was considered, at one point Massachusetts was considering to make it the capital before they chose Boston because it's so old. There's a real historic value to it, and I don't think that, you know, this kind of project would really benefit that. I think that it would be a detriment. I also know that there's a lot of people in Newburyport that make good money, the businesses do well, but the retail space is very expensive, and places in this town are in and out because they can't afford the retail space. And a lot of people, myself including, can't afford moderate apartments. I mean, you guys, Newburyport's putting in those new condos on High Street, and they're starting at $950,000. I mean, that's a lot of money, and because I called and I personally asked because I was curious. What we need is less condos and less of the development companies benefiting and more affordable housing for people who don't make $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. I mean, I think the median income in Newburyport is somewhere around 70. A lot of people don't make that. I mean, there's a lot of people out near the rail trail that that are living in tents because it's so expensive to live in Newburyport. And I think that if this project was allowed, then it would definitely add to that. And that's not necessarily something I want to see. Also, just to finish up, if you guys take away my coffee shop, I'm going to be real upset about it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ruth Allen. I live at 60 Boardman Street in Newburyport. I moved here in 1979, so I've been around for quite a while, and the entire time that I've been here, we've been having this discussion, and I'm so tired of it. And honestly, this is nothing against you, you seem like lovely gentlemen, but you know what? We don't need you, and I don't think most of us really want you here. And like I say, I'm not, and I don't mean you personally, I mean, we like our town the way it is. When I lived in New Jersey, which is where I went to high school, there were what they call gated communities. If you put the NED thing on the waterfront, that's what we'll have, a gated community on the waterfront. That's absurd. This is Newburyport. That's my first comment. Let me take a breath. My second comment is, you keep talking about the Black Cow as an iconic restaurant. It's not an iconic restaurant. It's a transplant from Hamilton. Okay? I will grant you that Michael's Harborside is an iconic restaurant. It's where my husband and I had our first kiss, and we've been married for almost 37 years. So that's an iconic restaurant. Plum Island Coffee Roasters. You've all heard what Plum Island Coffee Roasters means to people. I don't get to go every day, but I'm there at 7 o'clock every morning all summer. Now I'm back to teaching, so I can't do that. But that's an iconic building. That's something that we need. We do not need to put more development on the waterfront. Sell it, turn it into whatever you want to do. Just don't do what you're doing now. We don't need it. We don't want it. It's not Newburyport. What we have now is maybe not perfect, but it means a lot to all of us. And I just think you need to just back off and say, okay, enough. Let's just say, we can't do this. Let's sell it back, whatever you have to do, but no thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jane Snow, 9 Coffin Street.
Closer to the mic.
First, I want to say thank you very much to everybody for all the time, effort, plans, drawing slides, and so forth. But I think one thing that I picked up at tonight's meeting, you talked a lot about the parking, but you didn't talk about parking for your commercial or your restaurants and things. And when you get to be a little on the older side, you can't always do the hikes that you'd like to do to get to the restaurants. So you are making that almost like a gated community, and you're cutting it off to certain people. I was born in Newburyport, so I haven't gone far. And it isn't the flavor of the city, and I don't know if you folks have taken time to spend a week here and walk around and go get your coffee down at the Plum Island Roaster and go to the Middle Street and find out they have the most fantastic scones, and go to Cashman Park and see the group of people that sit there just about every morning and have their cup of coffee. That's what Newburyport is about. I'm sorry, and this sounds negative and I don't mean to be, but that to me is a warehouse. And it's an expensive warehouse. And I looked up the prices, and I couldn't sell my home, and I have a decent home, let me tell you, and buy one of your units. I would go from a full ranch home with a half acre of land, and I'd be hard-pressed to get a two-bedroom apartment there. So in the meetings that I've been to, we've stressed diversity, having affordable housing and so forth. This reminds me of a place that's for the exclusive. And yes, if you want to walk around the waterfront, as long as we don't run you over with a boat, that's fine. So again, I think that comment that people make about the flavor and about the people that make Newburyport, I think it's important. Come, spend a week. Come, I'll take you around. I'm sure there's lots of other people, and you'll be surprised at the things that you'll find that are unique about Newburyport and how people chip in when somebody's having difficulties and help one another. And I'm sorry
Please
that
wrap
that
up,
doesn't
Ms.
portray that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Reg Bacon. I live on Strong Street in Newburyport. I'm fairly new in town, just 35 years. I don't drink coffee, but I have been a guide at a prison. There are two points I'd like to make. One is to the city. I would hope, even though we're very early in the process, believe it or not, after all these years, I hope that the planning board, the zoning board, and our elected city officials, as well as our volunteer public servants, would be careful to enforce the zoning laws that we have going forward and not sell out to anybody or negotiate like we're some sort of a flea market here. The other point I would like to make to the developer, well, when I look at the plans, I'm going to be very brief. It makes me think of my dear departed father-in-law from Kansas, a PhD scientist who nevertheless had some very pithy observations about things. And the one thing that stands in my mind is his statement when something struck him was 10 pounds of you-know-what in a 5-pound bag. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alicia Stevenson, off of Boardman and off of Atkinson Street. It's a weird address, but over there. I use the rail trail every day. I have kids in the school system. So I just want to read something from the 2003 strategic plan. Part of the vision statement said, where children from the South End can bike to visit North End friends without leaving the waterfront. That's not happening. It's not safe. There's no public spaces. The public spaces are like the Market Basket parking lot. You might get hit by a boat or you might get hit by a car. It's going to be busy because of the commercial space down below. But what's concerning is what type of commercial space is going to be able to afford it. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if you take Merrimack Street, the clearance on a sidewalk is 5 feet 2 inches. An average stroller is double wide, another person. I mean, it's, you know, how do I tell my kids you got to go up to High Street on a bike path? Just, that's about it.
Thank you.
Andrew Simpson, Greenleaf Street. Andrew Simpson. Last time I was here, I asked about similar projects that New England Development may have had, and I was referred to the Westwood Station site. I would like, if the committee can, to get a real good sense of who New England Development is in terms of a developer. Do they have a history of building in historic areas, and on waterfronts. Is this, where their expertise is this something that they can do well, and is it a priority to do that? The other comment would be that given Bruce's experience at Alcatraz, I would think he'll be very comfortable with this project, looking out his window every day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Blake Wilcox, 33 Market Street, Newburyport. I've been here 13 years, so I'm new. I walk my dog every day from Market Street down the rail trail along the new concrete sidewalk. That's actually kind of nice to walk on versus the stone. So I walk this path every day. I know it well, day and night. I will give you a cautionary tale, right? I'm a builder in town. I also am a builder in Boston, right? I've built high-rises in Boston. I built some stuff here. There is something really special about Newburyport. If you guys don't find a way to capture that and get tuned into it, you're not going to get this project through. I promise you. There's really something special here. I have met a lot of people in my travels of building in Newburyport from all over the world. People from D.C., people from Europe, people from New York City. They've looked at every town on the coast between Boston and Portsmouth. There is something oddly special and magical about Newburyport, and if you don't figure out what it is and how to convey that in this design, you're really going to have a hard time in this town, because I'm telling you, it's magical here, and there's no other way to put it. Again, being a builder here, I'm a little bit hypocritical because I sometimes find myself in your seat, but the one thing I do strongly believe in is that if you don't figure out what that magic is and you don't spend at least a week here full-time, walk your dog here, drink the coffee from the locals, you're not going to tap into the essence of what this needs to be to Newburyport. So that's my time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Scott Nelson. I just moved to Newburyport about a year ago this week, so Milk Street. So we moved from Boston, and we watched a lot of this going on around us. And I do have to apologize. I was half hour late because I have 2 little kids and wanted to see them to bed. So if this was already addressed at the beginning, I do apologize. But I don't see where in this proposal there's any sort of community use. It seems like the only people benefiting are the developers, where I think the reason you have this many upset people at you, and I was kind of surprised because I wanted to figure out what the debate was about. And it doesn't really seem like it's a debate. It seems like people trying to do things and push upon the public. Perhaps maybe our wonderful president, by his book about master negotiation, whatever his art of the deal is, maybe you should try and think about what you could do to maybe make your deal more positive. Maybe convey some land back to the town for public use. Maybe like what's going on the South End in Boston, Southie. No one wanted to be in Southie. Now you go there, high-rises everywhere. But you know what all the developers did? They donated money back, and there's the most beautiful park being built in Boston right now at the Martin Richard Foundation, all paid by these developers. So if you want to try and get on the side of getting something this proposed, listen to the people about how you can actually get it done by making it essential, having it being something that people are going to use, not make it for people coming to the town. I mean, obviously the tax and the things, the town might benefit a little bit, but the people in this room are not going to see the benefit from this unless you actually do something like set up a space at one of the hotels for awesome Plum Island coffee roasters, all these iconic things. Maybe carve out some of the things that you're hearing and then donate a part of the parcel to an awesome park. So.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Judy Moradian, 46 Liberty Street. I think no matter what you would do to give back to Newburyport, we would still think this is too dense. We're talking about between Michael's and the Black Cow, 230 condos plus storefronts and a 100-room hotel and all this parking, and it's just too dense. And I'd like to piggyback on the Zero Waste Group. So we have this density with 230 condos and a 100-room hotel and all these stores. Where is all the garbage going to go? Where is it going to be out of sight? How is the city going to deal with all of that trash? Are they going to be able to recycle? You know, some condos don't. I mean, we need to think about that. And also, I hope any parking studies that are done that you base your opinion on will be done by the city and not by, I mean, New England Development can do their own studies, but we need to do our own. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brian Davis. I'm at 74 Pleasant Street, and unlike many of you who've been here years and years and years, I actually am a recent resident also. Actually, I came to Newburyport with my wife to see a Riverfront concert about 10 years ago, and we always planned that we'd come back someday. So we actually moved up here about 9 months ago, and everything that you guys talk about, the heritage and the feel and the community, is exactly what attracted us and exactly what we felt for 9 months. So I think that, and you've heard it a couple of times tonight, I think that there's really two elements to this. There's a technical element and engineering element, and as an engineer, I believe all those problems can be solved. There's ways to get all that resolved. The emotional side of this thing is the problem. I would recommend that New England Development take a real hard look, scrap that plan, and make an honest effort to come back here with a plan that actually resembles Newburyport. Then and only then, I think, will you get the community to support you. Watching the presentation, all the buildings that you put up, from the Garrison and this building and the church, it was kind of a joke. My house is 200 feet from here. I'm literally the next house over. The reason I bought there was for all of that feel. Brown Square's right across from me, and I'm like, the only thing odd in this whole picture is that development. It doesn't fit. You can't look at that picture and go, this fits. It doesn't make sense. You should take that slide, go put it in your office, and tell everybody, make the buildings look like this, and you'd be okay. So I think you need to look at those two elements. The other thing I also would urge the council, independent traffic, independent parking, any studies and numbers that they use, I think that you should have an independent study on that too. In the marina, also safety. I think you have to do a whole safety thing. That working marina was actually an insult to our intelligence. I'm sorry. You have 3 things coming in. That looks like somebody threw it on there later because you had to put up a slide tonight. So I think that's an insult. I think you have to do that. Go back, scrap the plan, start over, and come back here a few months from now.
Thank you.
Good evening, Donna Holliday, Mayor, resident at 6 Parsons Street. First of all, I just wanted to thank all of the residents who came out tonight to talk. I think this is so important that you give your feedback to all of us in terms of this project. I think it was Ann who said it at the beginning of the presentation. I've had 2 internal meetings, if you will, with NED on this project, where our comments were, it's a start, you're moving in the right direction. And I am very disappointed tonight to see no additional changes based on any of the feedback that you have received. I think it's pretty clear from what everyone has said tonight that the project as it stands is not going to work for our city. We need something that has much more public space, that has a lot less density, and I would prefer that you did something like 100 and 125 units down there as opposed to over 200. And we do want the hotel. That's important for our economic development and the future of our city. The working waterfront, I think, has been talked about sufficiently in terms of the problems with that. You can't have public space and have a road and boats going through it. It's not going to work. Mixed use is fine, but I think you really need to think about, too, as a retailer, all the retailers that you own this property in our community, it's been difficult. People move out of your leases as soon as possible because it's difficult to work with the kinds of percentages that you expect from our retailers. And we don't want to see this happen here either. You have an incredibly talented team. Stop making, this is why density is going to work. This is why height is going to work. This is what we can do outside of, with the existing zoning. You heard from Lisa Mead. Please listen to what you have heard tonight. This is our home, our community, our historical waterfront, and that what you have proposed here won't work. This is our future. You need to listen to what we're telling you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara Oswald, State Street. I think Donna has said it all. Thank you, Donna. But I'm here tonight to speak to our city council and to also ask that the zoning board and the planning board please look out for our best interests, because we're terrified of this. I'm not seeing people coming up that are neutral about this. Honestly, this rings of dishonesty, because if they're saying that they think that that's a legitimate plan, I'm terrified. I'm terrified that somehow this is going to slip through. Please hold on to the zoning that we have. We don't have to let this happen. I've lived here 40 years, and I'm just really scared about this, that this is going to turn into something where no one can afford to live there. Nothing against people of a higher income, but let's make sure that if we're going to really deal this beautiful piece of property, let's make it a more varied, affordable housing. Let's have legitimate open space. I'm kind of shocked that they talked about the boating and the parking lot as open space. I mean, honestly, I don't know if they think we're fools, but we're not fools. And I will remark on the day that Mr. Karp came to the Knock Middle School and was shocked that 700 people were there. And I didn't get to speak that night, but a lot of people did. I'm just asking the city, I'm not even talking about NED, please look out for our best interests. Like, we're terrified. I'm in a sweat over this, and it's not just because it's hot, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Brett Lefebvre, Horton's Yard. Just a brief statement. I want to go on record to second what Lisa Mead said earlier in the day, and also to thank the board for posting the requirements I asked for at the last meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mary Snowden. I've lived in this city for 76 years. I was born in this hospital, and I live in Newburyport all my life. And I, too, am scared to death of that. It is not Newburyport that I grew up with. It's a mess. And I think something really needs to be done about it. I'm not sure what, but something. And I just hope that there are enough people who can say no to a lot of what's going on there.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Young. I'm a retired physician, and my wife Jeanette would be here, but she's at the hospital, Charter Street. I think probably everybody knows this here, except maybe these folks, that Newburyport about 300 years ago was called Newbury. And there was a conflict. The merchant and sailors and marine folks that lived where we are right here had a conflict with the farmers because the business was different. And they decided in, I think, 1754 that we'd become Newburyport and no longer Newbury's, which is why there's two cities now. So first thing I would say is if we were to do anything like this, maybe we would have to give up the name Port, because I don't see that this would be a realistic, and we'd just be Newbury again. And I think there's a lot of folks here, the mayor included, who I think get it. When I heard one of these fellows over here say there's a conflict between a working marina and, this is a quote, highly valuable urban space. Seems to me this is already highly valuable urban space the way it is right now. And the last thing I would suggest to these folks here is I'd like to see Mr. Karp and the development group, whatever that legal entity is, donate all of this property, 100% of it, to the city of Newburyport, and we'll figure out how to make it into exactly what we want it to be. And he can take a nice big tax write-off instead of making hundreds of millions of dollars on what he plans to do here. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Hold on. So does anyone else wish to speak? Please come to the microphone. I don't want to, we want to stick as close as we can to the rules of engagement. So.
My name is Ellen Kennedy. I live in Newbury Village in Newbury. I moved to Newburyport in 1985. I brought my children up here. Both my daughters settled here. I have 6 grandchildren in the school system, and I love this community. I moved out to Western Mass. I lived in Hampton Falls, but I always kept coming home to Newburyport because my heart is in Newburyport. I worked for the Daily News for 7 years. I worked for community newspapers for 10 years in retail advertising. I served on boards to build the firehouse. I was very close to the retail community from 1985 till 1995. Till 1998, I think. And I saw retailers leave Newburyport and go to Newbury Street because the rents went up that high. When I'm looking at this, I can't help thinking of Southport. Someone mentioned the development in Boston and what happened there. And I was there maybe 6 months ago, and I took a walk in Southport with these incredibly built condos. And it was so sterile. You're on the waterfront, but you're not on the waterfront. And so this looks to me more like Westport and something very separate from Newburyport. I'm also part of the storm surge community, and if anybody saw that presentation of what would have happened if Sandy hit Newburyport, and that was a wiggle in a hurricane. I mean, we came that close for it to hitting here. And if the storm surge had happened, water would have been at the high school. All of Merrimack Street would have been underwater. So I can't even imagine why anybody would want to be building and investing this kind of money in the potential of a waterfront flood. And we all saw what happened in Southport just this past winter with the flooding there. I mean, that was an unexpected tidal surge that could happen here. We live on the water. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor-
Dr. Mahmood, I wanted...
Councillor Earls, give me his 2 minutes.
I'm sorry?
Councillor Earls, give me his 2 minutes. I'm going to check on the
I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way.
Okay.
It doesn't
Thank
work
you.
that way. But please, we're all here. I want to encourage anyone who's not spoken before, please come to the mic.
Karen Johnson, 120 High Street. I just wanted to, I don't know if commend is the right word, but Donna's, Mayor Holliday's comments were exactly much of what I've thought, and I have forwarded emails to all of our councilmen reflecting most of what was said this evening. But I just want to say the historic charm and character and value of this city is in your hands, and I know it is true, and I agree with all the people who've invited, all the people from New England Development to come spend an afternoon or 2 or 3, a morning, late afternoon, 4 o'clock, down at Plum Island Coffee and see the sense of the community that we have here. Obviously, I am in favor of having a hotel. I think we desperately need it. I think the retailers need it. You own the property. You're going to develop it somehow, but work with us to help us retain the charm and beauty of this historic city.
Thank you.
Jeanette Isabella, 1 Lime Street. So I've been here 30 years, but within that 30 years, I lived 12 years in Miami. And, you know, there's something about buildings that, that make you feel like not safe because when they're too big. And there was recently an architect who gave a talk at the community center that said that. She helped me to understand how I felt. I knew something was wrong, but I knew the buildings were too high, but I didn't know that there was a real sort of phenomenon about that. I can't imagine that we would walk, you know, as we take our morning walks to wherever we're going along the waterfront, to be going down those walkways. I can't imagine that we would do that. That is going to be an enclave. It's going to be one sort of separate part of Newburyport that we won't feel any part of whatsoever. something wrong with that. And also, I don't know if I misread one of the slides, but I think that one of the building heights was a church steeple. I mean, are we serious? You're going to tell us that a church steeple is as high as the buildings you want to put in, and so that's okay because the church does it, you can do it? I mean, that's not right. We're not stupid. So, my real question to New England Development is, you bought this land. You knew what Newburyport was. You knew what the zoning was. And in order for you to do what you have to turn us inside out, to do something that we're not legally bound to do. Why would you do that? You could buy a place where the zoning meets your needs. But if you want to build here, meet our needs. And again, and others, thank you. And others have said it.
Please wrap up.
Yeah, I just want to again ask our councilmen and planning board and zoning board to do what we want you to do. You all work so hard, but don't let this happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I speak as a citizen? I'd like to speak as a resident as opposed to a lawyer. May I do that? Seriously, just two small points.
All right.
So, Lisa Mead, 13 Purchase Street in Newburyport. I just want to, I think it's really important to highlight a comment Rick made and Alicia made about the 2003 plan and the goal to connect in a broad enough way between Michael's and the waterfront, the rest of the waterfront, because it makes this point. The reason the Newburyport waterfront works, the downtown waterfront, is because you feel like you're there, that you're on the water, that nobody is on your back, that you're safe, that you're enjoying it with pedestrians. And it's not cut up, it's linear. And that's why it works, and that's why waterfronts in other cities don't work, and that's why this waterfront has been used as an example in many other places for construction. 30 years ago this year, I spoke for the very first time in a public meeting in the city of Newburyport on the then behalf of the Committee for an Open Waterfront in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, arguing against the hotel on the NRA property. That's not what we have here, but it's as serious because they're not making this anymore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Tim Connors, 16 School Street. Just a few quick comments. I won't take my 2 minutes up. I'll pass the 1 minute left. The reality is they need a partner. And you've got to look at this group of people and say, we want to embrace you. You own that property. You've got a chance to do wonderful things. But you can't do it without them. And so that's really something for you guys to think about. And my second point is, Picker is wonderful. It's a part of my life. I've only been here 2 years. But when I walk in the front door of Plum Island Coffee Roasters, they know my name. I feel like I'm on Cheers. Kind of cool for 2 years. Not bad, huh? I encourage you to show up at 7 o'clock in the morning and have a cup of coffee at the piano. That's a deal I'll buy. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Oh, good. More fresh blood. Go ahead.
Hi. I'm Yvonne Chabrier, 34 Warren Street. 4 points. One, I didn't realize that the 2003 plan did call for the protection of that walkway, and I would like to add my support for keeping that walkway between Michael's and our other walkway all clear and have all the development on the other side. Number 1 point, I think, is very well taken. Also, I think that our mayor has made very clear that the density in terms of the number of units is just too big. I hope that the financials can be worked out so that we could come back down to 100 maybe units of housing at the most. Someone in the last meeting, August 16th, spoke about how River's Edge is, I think, 80 units, somewhere between 60 and 80. I didn't quite retain the exact number, but we shouldn't have anything larger or more dense in this new development than what is on the other side of Route 1. That's my second point. My third point is that in terms of the character development scale of the buildings, is there any way that Brown's Wharf building, which now exists on the site, could be retained and become a model for how you might build out the separate buildings? So that if we had a kind of scale here of buildings that honored what is currently on the site and has historical resonance, that would be terrific. And I think that those are my main points. But I think that I will say that we cannot stop development. That is a dream. We cannot stop life. We cannot stop changes. We can only hope that we can influence the changes that do occur in a way that respects what we do love about our city.
Thank you. Okay, it's very hot, but really this is a great opportunity. You know, that you were very patient. There was a presentation August 16th that I had to miss, and then, as I said, we had our own study session. So, you know, anyone from the peanut gallery want to come down? No? Okay. All right. The videotape is going to be kept by PortMedia and will be posted online. You should feel free to contact really any of us up here on this at this table for further information. We do not have another meeting scheduled right now. We have to take all this input in, and more importantly, the team has to take it all in and figure out where we go from here. So there is nothing pending. There's no application in. I just want to make that clear. There is no ability for this project or zoning for this project to be approved in the dead of night, because there is nothing. But please do write us, and we'll come out to the public again as soon as we can. And if you have questions after this meeting, we'll stay after and give you our information. I want to thank everyone for coming and testifying. Thank you.